The modern doctrine changes the equation. National security, supply chain resilience, and economic sovereignty now dictate the terms. The instrument of choice? Tariffs. Deployed aggressively to penalize trade imbalances and force manufacturing back onto U.S. soil. By 2025 and into 2026, tariffs transitioned from academic theory into the everyday vernacular of global commerce. High-tech components, critical minerals, and heavy industry became focal points of sweeping regulatory pressure. As effective tariff rates climbed and subsequently fluctuated, businesses scrambled to adapt to an unpredictable regulatory environment, and corporate supply chain managers transformed overnight from logistics coordinators into geopolitics experts. At the heart of execution is the USTR, tasked with implementing the sweeping directives of the America First trade policy agenda. The framework rests on clear pillars: demanding reciprocity from trading partners, strictly enforcing trade laws, and reshoring critical industrial bases. Clean energy tech, pharmaceuticals, and advanced computing are heavily prioritized under these defensive shields. Proponents point to early factory expansions and localized output milestones as proof that the strategy is working. Data from mid-2026 indicates the overall goods and services trade deficit has notably narrowed as import patterns normalize. As union leaders have emphasized, for too long American workers competed with foreign subsidies and suppressed wages, and leveling the playing field changes everything. For decades, the global marketplace operated on a simple promise: open borders, frictionless supply chains, and free trade. Today, that architecture is fracturing. A new era of economic nationalism has redrawn the map of international commerce. At the epicenter of this transformation is United States trade policy, a high-stakes strategy reshaping how nations buy, sell, and compete. Moving away from multilateral consensus, Washington has embraced a system driven by bilateral leverage, tariffs, and industrial protectionism. Proponents argue it's the only way to shield domestic workers and rebuild a hollowed-out manufacturing core, while critics counter that it risks fragmenting the global economy, driving up costs, and triggering retaliatory cycles. To understand this shift, we must look back at the anatomy of the U.S. trade deficit, long viewed by policymakers not just as an economic imbalance, but as a national security threat. For generations, Americans consumed vastly more than they exported, bleeding trillions of dollars overseas to manufacturing powerhouses. Cheap imports filled store shelves, keeping inflation low while quietly dismantling domestic production lines in fields from steel to electronics. As experts have noted, we treated trade policy as an exercise in consumer welfare alone, completely ignoring the strategic vulnerabilities of our supply chains. By 2026, the data confirmed a structural shift. China was no longer the single country with which the U.S. ran its largest goods trade deficit. Trade flows quickly diverted, and manufacturing migrated across borders to nations offering alternative pathways and lower tariff exposures. As supply chain strategists point out, China didn't disappear from global supply chains. Rather, it became bypassed through China Plus One strategies and nearshoring hubs. Countries like Vietnam, India, and Mexico stepped into the vacuum, absorbing capital investments meant to de-risk exposure, while simultaneously finding themselves under intense scrutiny regarding rules of origin and local content requirements. The USTR's agenda doubled down on bilateral frameworks, seeking to transform provisional agreements into permanent agreements across the globe, reaching from the European Union and Japan to South Korea, Ecuador, and Thailand. Each pact serves a specific strategic objective: lowering foreign barriers while securing reciprocal market access for American exporters. Yet navigating these framework agreements has proven complex, requiring legislative validation across diverse political landscapes. In Europe, framework deals face rigorous reviews, intersecting with local regulatory frameworks like the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. The intersection of green regulations and trade policy has created a new class of non-tariff barriers, often dubbed para-tariffs. As trade lawyers observe, we are moving away from simple tariff schedules toward trade compliance that requires aligning with labor rights, environmental standards, and national security clearances. Yet, this realignment hasn't come without friction, trickling directly down into consumer pricing and corporate balance sheets. disparities in baseline tariff rates globally remain a central point of diplomatic tension and trade negotiation. The overarching objective is clear: replace multilateral stagnation with bilateral leverage that prioritizes American economic dominance. But as markets adjust, economists remain deeply divided over the long-term sustainability of aggressive tariff measures, noting that tariffs act essentially as a tax on domestic consumers, diffusing costs across the entire economy. Households absorbed the initial wave of these costs, particularly in durable goods like automobiles, electronics, and furniture, while monetary policymakers watched closely as tariff pass-through effects intersected with persistent core inflation targets. This brings us to the shifting dynamics of the world's most critical bilateral relationship and the systemic decoupling from Beijing. For decades, China served as the undisputed workshop of the world, anchoring global supply chains. The bilateral trade deficit reached staggering heights, driving a deep structural reliance that Washington ultimately deemed unsustainable. The flashpoint arrived with a series of aggressive, reciprocal tariff hikes that pushed base rates into unprecedented territory. As tariffs climbed, strategic counter-restrictions followed, targeting critical minerals, magnets, and advanced technological exports. The ensuing economic shockwaves forced a tactical pause, culminating in high-level framework agreements designed to manage bilateral friction. Nowhere is this multi-layered oversight more pronounced than in the high-tech battleground of semiconductors and artificial intelligence. Export controls have effectively replaced import barriers as the primary tool for maintaining technological supremacy over strategic rivals. Limiting access to cutting-edge AI hardware and design tools has fragmented the global tech landscape into distinct allied blocs, while cooperation among trusted allies has tightened, reinforcing security-driven trade corridors at the expense of open global markets. Critical minerals represent the next frontier, prompting plans for plurilateral pricing mechanisms and resource stockpiling, as Washington aims to insulate these vital supply lines from external coercion through coordinated resource security agreements. Meanwhile, independent players and developing economies are carving out alternative trade frameworks focused on traditional open markets. Initiatives like the Future of Investment and Trade Partnership highlight a growing desire among neutral nations to preserve frictionless capital movement. The global trading system is no longer unified. It is rapidly bifurcating into regional blocs defined by political alignment. As economic historians note, we haven't seen this level of managed, bloc-based trade since the mid-20th century, and the era of blind faith in globalization is definitively over. As bilateral pacts mature, the fundamental architecture of international commerce continues its relentless evolution, and every border crossing now demands deeper verification, tighter origin tracking, and comprehensive regulatory compliance. Macroeconomic policy ultimately finds its true measure at the retail counter and inside household budgets. Recent findings from the Federal Reserve reveal that effective tariff rates fell significantly heading into mid-2026, easing extreme pressures. The effective tariff rate, what importers actually pay once exemptions and trade adjustments are factored in, has stabilized, and economists note that the direct pass-through of tariffs to consumer prices has largely leveled off after driving excess inflation through early 2026. While tariffs initially accounted for a major fraction of inflation above our target, other macroeconomic drivers like energy costs have since taken over. Durable goods categories, particularly vehicles, consumer electronics, and furniture, absorb the sharpest initial price shocks, prompting consumers to adapt their spending habits by shifting toward lower-priced alternatives and prioritizing essential expenditures. Corporations faced a difficult choice: absorb the tariff burden or pass increased import costs directly down to retail buyers. As retail supply chain executives have expressed, companies couldn't absorb a 30% duty without compromising operations, making pricing adjustments an unfortunate necessity to maintain business viability. To mitigate these overheads, companies aggressively reoriented sourcing networks toward countries and products carrying lower tariff schedules, making alternative routing strategies and tax mitigation planning core competencies for modern retail giants. Legal challenges also played a decisive role, including pivotal judicial rulings regarding emergency economic powers and duty implementations, prompting unexpected rollbacks and recalibrations of specific tariff rates that forced rapid adjustments from federal agencies. As policy uncertainties waxed and waned, monthly trade gaps narrowed, pointing toward a gradual normalization of trade flows. On the domestic manufacturing front, surveys indicated factory expansions and positive growth indicators not seen in years, with proponents highlighting rising private sector earnings and resurgent domestic steel production as tangible benefits of the protective agenda. Protecting industrial sectors has certainly yielded localized wage gains, but the broader question remains whether these benefits outweigh economy-wide friction. Investment dollars continue to pour into strategic domestic sectors, backed by federal industrial policy incentives and tax levers, as proponents argue that every factory brought back online strengthens local communities and secures long-term economic independence. For small and medium-sized enterprises, however, navigating the maze of compliance costs remains an ongoing operational challenge. Customs compliance, origin verification, and tariff classification require specialized legal guidance that smaller firms struggle to afford. As small business import entrepreneurs have pointed out, big corporations can hire entire legal departments to handle tariff loopholes, while small businesses are left bearing the brunt of the administrative weight. Balancing national industrial protection against the agility of small-scale importing remains one of the policy's greatest internal contradictions. Yet ports and border checkpoints serve as the physical boundaries where policy theory meets economic reality, and supply chains have proven remarkably resilient, bending under regulatory pressure rather than breaking completely. At the global level, U.S. trade policy continues to challenge the foundational rules of traditional international institutions. Washington has long criticized the WTO for judicial overreach and an inability to address modern issues like state-backed industrial overcapacity. The strategic agenda advocates for a fundamental reassessment of the most favored nation principle, empowering nations to differentiate among trading partners. As international law professors explain, the U.S. is effectively bypassing old multilateral courts in favor of flexible, interest-based coalitions among trusted economic allies. International forums now serve as battlegrounds where differing visions of global economic governance collide. While core issues like digital trade moratoria, forced labor prevention, and market access flexibility remain central to U.S. negotiating stances, digital trade policies face fierce debates, particularly regarding permanent moratoria on electronic transmission duties and cross-border data flows, with Silicon Valley giants and digital service providers warning that fractured internet regulations could cripple global cloud infrastructure. Closer to home, the spotlight turns directly to North America and the comprehensive review of the USMCA. As the joint review of the Trade Pact gets underway, trade deficits and sector-specific barriers are facing rigorous scrutiny. With goods trade deficits with Mexico expanding significantly, Washington is pressing for stricter rules of origin and localization checks. As North American trade analysts note, the USMCA review isn't just a routine checkup. It's a referendum on regional supply chain integration and automotive content rules. These elements no longer function as isolated policies. They are merging into a unified system of comprehensive regulatory pressure. Compliance is no longer about checking box A or box B. It requires total traceability from raw mineral extraction to final retail sale. Global shipping corridors are adapting to these multi-layered compliance demands with enhanced digital tracking systems. And analysts predict that trade fragmentation will remain the defining characteristic of the global economy for the foreseeable future. Think tanks and economic institutes are constantly revising their models to account for unpredictable tariff pivots and bilateral deal cycles. And for multinational corporations, agility and diversification have become absolute prerequisites for survival. The days of relying on a single overseas manufacturing hub are gone, replaced by resilient, redundant networks. The debate over open markets versus strategic protectionism continues to polarize economists and policymakers alike. As former trade negotiators reflect, when you weaponize trade policy, you achieve specific strategic goals, but you also force the entire world to re-architect its economic foundation. Fortunately, automation and advanced robotics have made domestic reshoring far more viable than it was a generation ago. Capital goods exports in high-value sectors like aerospace and semiconductors continue to break records, offsetting consumer deficits. And American high-tech manufacturing finds robust demand abroad, even as protective barriers rise at home. In Washington, lawmakers and executive agencies continue to refine the tools of economic statecraft, forming a baseline for future trade negotiations for decades to come, as the modern era of U.S. trade policy permanently bridges domestic industrial policy with international geopolitics. As we look to the future, the overarching question remains: can a fractured global economy sustain long-term growth? As leading global macroeconomists observe, we are navigating uncharted waters where the system is more resilient to specific shocks, but structurally less efficient. Innovation continues to drive industrial adaptation, with advanced technologies bridging gaps in labor and supply. While protectionist measures protect domestic industries, international bodies warn of long-term drag on global output, even as strategic sectors like green energy and semiconductors remain insulated and heavily subsidized by national industrial policies. Diversification has replaced pure cost efficiency as the guiding mantra for corporate boardrooms worldwide, and multinational enterprises have learned to operate in an environment where geopolitical alignment dictates commercial access. For everyday citizens, the impacts are deeply nuanced, balancing higher costs in certain goods against revitalized regional job markets. As labor representatives remind us, a strong domestic industrial base isn't just an economic luxury. It's the foundation of national security and working-class stability. The turbulent cycle of recent years has given way to a calculated, institutionalized framework of managed trade. Ports that once faced severe bottlenecks now process shipments under streamlined, albeit heavily monitored, regulatory protocols where compliance verification has become instantaneous, integrating digital tracking with strict rules of origin enforcement. Internal supply lines are stronger, more localized, and deeply connected to national security priorities. The policy agenda looking forward maintains its unwavering commitment to the America First doctrine. Ongoing reviews of major trade pacts and targeted enforcement measures ensure that pressure on trading partners will persist. As geopolitical risk analysts emphasize, the playbook is set, and tariffs, export controls, and industrial subsidies are permanent features of modern American economic statecraft. Technology and trade policy are now inextricably linked, driving the race for dominance in artificial intelligence and critical minerals. The world has moved past the illusion of a borderless market, settling instead into a competitive era of strategic economic blocs. Markets have priced in this new reality, adapting to fluctuating tariff schedules and bilateral negotiation cycles. With inflationary pressures leveling off, the immediate economic shock has transitioned into a manageable baseline. From the halls of the USTR to corporate boardrooms across the globe, the impact of these policies is profound and lasting. Industries have transformed, supply chains have diversified, and the rules of international commerce have been rewritten. As economic historians conclude, history will judge whether this pivot secured long-term prosperity or institutionalized division. But make no mistake, there is no turning back. The great reordering of global trade is complete, establishing a new paradigm that will govern international relations for generations. Nations must now chart their course through a competitive world defined by sovereignty, security, and strategic leverage. For the United States, the compass is set firmly toward domestic industrial strength and bilateral economic dominance. From tariffs and trade deficits to technological export controls, the pillars of modern policy are firmly entrenched. We have witnessed the dismantling of old frameworks and the rapid construction of a managed, nationalist trade order. The ultimate success of this grand experiment rests on the shoulders of the domestic workforce and industrial innovators. Factories are humming, supply chains are adapting, and economic sovereignty has taken center stage. As trade flows normalize and effective tariff rates settle, the global economy enters its next chapter. The rules of the global game have changed forever. The only question left is how nations will thrive within the new boundaries. The machinery of international commerce never stops, even as the rules governing its voyage are completely rewritten. This is the new reality of American trade policy, a calculated gamble on economic nationalism in an interconnected world.